the one, the only, Ben
Welcome to YouTube, Just Dafit. Today we continue Maseches Gittin, Daf Lamed Ches, number 38. Interesting share about avodim, non-Jews buying avodim, partially buying avodim, freeing your eved. You need to give a get shefer or not. We'll talk about that in the coming days in Yom Tzion. We're also going to learn about halacha that if you have an eved kind, you're not allowed to free him. If you violate a mitzvah essay, we hold it halachically, but under certain circumstances, the Gemara indicates that it's okay. For example, to make a minyan, the Gemara says. So we'll have to analyze that. There's two opinions in the Rishonim why that was okay even though it's only for a mitzvah derabanan to say kaddish or kedusha with a minyan, which presumably is only derabanan. We'll discuss that. Machlokes the Rosh and the Ramban. I want to talk about that in Yud Ben Tzil. Let's start the bottom of Lamed Zayin and Beis. 4 lines from the bottom. Right? We had 2 explanations of the Mishnah on lines Zayin and Beis. What is the Mishnah talking about? It's malachos between the Rabbanan and the Shmuel. Right? The Rabbanan say that it depends. If you free an Eved, right, is captured by a non-Jewish person, you want to free him. So if you free him with the intention of him going back to being an Eved, he goes back to being an Eved. If you free him with the intention of freeing him completely, he's free. Shmuel says in both cases he remains as an Eved. So Malchus Abayi, remember what the Mishnah is talking about. Abayi says talking about Lifnei Yesh, before the owner gave up hope. Rava explains it La'achar Yesh. So the Mishnah Rava Damar La'achar Yesh. Ul Rabo Sheni, right? What does it mean that if he redeems the Eved, he ransoms the Eved for an Eved, he goes back to being an Eved according to the Rabbanan. That's not the first Rav, because the first master gave up on him. He was Miyayesh, he gave up hope. Yesh is like Hefker. We'll see Hefker today. You relinquish ownership over the Eved. But the person who redeems in the second master, he gets him to be his servant. Rav Sheni Man Kanile. Mishvai. He's coming from a non-Jew, the person who captured him. Shvai Gufe Mikanile. How can you buy something if someone doesn't own it? Right? Non-Jews, we're going to see in a second, can't own slaves. Jews can own slaves. Non-Jews can't own slaves. It's true that he can't be kona the body. We'll talk about the body and the wages, the ma'aseh yadav of the Eved Kaini, whatever he produces. But a non-Jew, we'll see, could acquire him for his ma'aseh yadav. Basically, any earnings that he goes back to the master, the non-Jewish master. How do you know that a non-Jew can be kona another non-Jew? Right? Eved Kaini is actually he's not completely non-Jewish, but he's partially Jewish. But even a non-Jew can be called l'maisi yadav. This is a pasuk that says that Jews can buy avadim from people that live in Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Canaan. They don't live there permanently. They're together with a Canaanite woman, and they have children. They could buy from them. Israel could buy non-Jews as avadim. You could buy from them. But they can never acquire ownership from you. Not only that, they can't even acquire from one another. So Rish Lakish says, you might think they can't acquire from each other. So the Gemara interjects. The Gemara says, that's sort of implying you might think they can't. Obviously they can. The Brisa said, right, that they can't buy from each other. The Brisa meant to say, they can't acquire the body of the Eved. They can't transfer ownership of the body of the Eved from one to another. You might think they can't be each other for ma'aseh yada, for their wages. Amar kal v'chomer. No, it's not true. He said kal v'chomer. Ovik kochavim Yisrael kona. And ovik kochavim a Jew could buy. Ovik kochavim Yisrael kona. Ovik kochavim lo kol shekain. If a non-Jew could be bought by Yisrael, so certainly a non-Jew could be bought by another non-Jew. Hold on a second. it's not exactly understood exactly what this Kal Vachomer is, because right, we know that a Jewish person could buy the actual body of an Eved Knaini or a non-Jew, but the Gemara is saying it just makes it's reasonable sense that if you're just acquiring wages, right, just acquiring how much money he earns, that it should belong to you. That's something in Svara, which makes sense logically, that you should be able to, even a non-Jew should be able to acquire from another non-Jew. Maybe that's only if you purchased the Ovei Kochavim with money, al b'chazaka lo. Right, chazaka, the case in our Mishnah, he captured him, right? The non-Jewish person captured him. And now when you capture someone, right, presumably the way you acquire him is with chazaka, right? The Gemara says that avadim knainim are like karkos. They're considered like real estate property. They're hukish karkos. And therefore, just like you're kona land with kesef shtar and chazaka, you change the land a little bit, you build a small fence or something like that, or you work the land a little bit, you're kona with chazaka. Similarly in Eved Knaini, the Gemara Kedushin details, you're kona with chazaka. If he dresses you, he bathes you, that's a way. So here also, when you capture it, presumably he served him someone. He served him a meal, he dressed him or something like that. So therefore, he was kona with chazaka. But maybe that's only when a Jew could acquire with chazaka. But here where he captured him with chazaka, presumably when he captured him, he was acquired in chazaka. Maybe that only works for Jews to be kona avadim knaini. But a non-Jew can't acquire another non-Jew or an Eved Knaini through chazaka. Amar of Papa, Amar of Tiru b'sichon. Papa answers that we know that they could be acquired with chazaka. How do you know this? That the Torah says you can't capture Ammon and Moab, right? Because Ammon and Moab, right, came from Lot. The Torah says that Ammon and Moab you can't go and capture their land. However, once Sichon came and he captured Ammon and Moab, so then Hashem told them they can capture the land of Av Sichon, which used to be Ammon and Moab, or at least was still the actual land that used to belong to Ammon and Moab. Because once Sichon captured them, and he acquired them by capturing them and a chazaka, right? They served him. If they served them, then he was coning them with chazaka. So therefore, he acquired them. So you see that Sichon could acquire them with chazaka, and that's why they're acquired to him. So that's why Klal is allowed to capture Sichon, because it's no longer considered Ammon and Moab. So you see it works with chazaka. So Gemara says, "Ekshkan Ovei Kochavim." That's a non-Jew buying a non-Jew. Ovei Kochavim Yisrael minalan. How do you know a non-Jew could buy a Yisrael for his ma'aseh yadav? Vayesh mimenu shevi. This week's parsha, Vayesh mimenu shevi, parsha Chukas. He went and the non-Jew captured a Jewish prisoner, and you see it works. He was called a shevi. He was called a prisoner. Amar Rav Shimon bar Abba Rabbi Yochanan Eved shabarach mebeis hasrum yatsa lecheres. If an Eved Knaini is in jail and he escaped from jail. Now it's not easy to escape from jail, right? He escapes from jail. Yatsa lecheres. He's free, right? He's not enslaved to his previous master. We also force his Rebbe, because he's free, to write a get shikhr. The get shikhr, we'll talk about this tomorrow, hopefully, in the Ben Sion. The get shikhr, right, severs the kinyan isser. There's two kinyanim you have in an Eved Knaini. One is you own him for his work, and you also own him in terms of being Eved Knaini in his kedusha. He's not considered a full Yisrael. He's considered Eved Knaini. He can't marry a Bas Yisrael. He can't marry a Bas Chorin. So therefore, the get shikhr severs the kinyan isser and allows him to marry Bas Chorin. Mishnah says, the previous Mishnah says, no matter what, he becomes an Eved. Every time Rosh Gamliel comments on a Mishnah, we always follow Rosh Gamliel, except for three exceptions. This is not one of the exceptions. By Erev being a co-signer alone, Mesachas Bava Basra, Sidon is something, a case mentioned later in Mesachas Gittin. The Raya Achron was mentioned in Mesachas Sanhedrin, talking about bringing proof after the case started already. The second case, it was two machlokas, and whether they were paskin like him in the first one, not in the second case over there in Sanhedrin. But this is not one of those cases. Rabbi Yochanan said we paskin shibun little here. Bishlam la Abaye. According to Abaye's understanding our Mishnah, Muki la lahai lifnei yesh, lahai la'achar yesh. He says our Mishnah is talking about lifnei yesh, right? And the case where we say that if he escapes from prison, right, which is similar to if he was taken captive and sold, right? So that's talking about Achar Yesh. And Rishon will be Moda in that case. Eved Shabarach, he's a free man, right? You just have to write a get shikhr for him. Ella Rava, Damar La'achar Yesh. These are Mishnah Tamar La'achar Yesh. Kasha the Yochanan and the Yochanan. Right? Well, Shmuel says no matter what, he remains enslaved to the second person, the person who ransomed him. But here we're saying that Eved Shabara, right? He fled jail, so he's free. Amal Chara, Rava said, Taimamai Mishum de Chizkiah. What's Shmuel's reason according to Rava? Because of Chizkiah, Bareach shiny. Bareach is different. The reason Chizkiah said, according to Rav Shimon Gamliel, is because Shmuel says that it's like knas. We make him go back to the person who ransomed him. Otherwise, people are gonna avadim are just gonna join armies and want to free themselves that way when their master gives up on them. So they made a takana that he's right goes back to his second rebbe, the person who ransomed him, his second master. However, when someone escapes from jail, he's putting his life on the line. It's pretty hard. Look at Shawshank Redemption. It's pretty hard to escape from jail. So he's willing to give up his life. In that case, Chizkiah, a person who's willing to give up his life is not going to go ahead and go from being a servant to being in an army, right, which is more servitude. So therefore, Chizkiah wouldn't apply over here. Amdei de Mar Shmuel, the maidservant of Mar Shmuel, Ishtaubai, she was captured by a non-Jew. Parkua l'shum amasa, the person who redeemed her to go back to being a maidservant in Shmuel's house. V'shadru alei shalchu lei anan krashimul svirle. They sent to him, to Shmuel, tell him, we hold like a Shmuel. At inami krabanan svirlach anan l'shum amasa parkinallah. We hold like Shmuel, she always returns to you, Shmuel. And even if you hold like the Rabbanan, we ransomed her to go back being an Eved. Even the Rabbanan are Moda, if you're Poder her, you ransom her to be an Eved, or be a maidservant, she goes back to Shmuel. Ve'inu savor lifnei yesh hava, v'lo ilachar yesh hava. They thought that in this case the master Shmuel had not abandoned getting his maidservant back. Nonetheless, v'lo ilachar yesh hava, it really was achar yesh, in which case the Rabbanan Moda, she's actually free. Even if you're Poder l'shem avda, she's free. Like Abaye says. But Shmuel, lo mibayi d'ashtude lo mishtabed ba. Shmuel himself, when he found out about this, not only did he not take her back as a maidservant, al gita de cherusa nami lo atzricha, he also says she doesn't need to get shecher. Shmuel tamei, Shmuel is according to his reasoning, Damar Shmuel, amafker avdi yotzel lecheros ve'enosar get shecher. This is a famous machlokas. A lot of Amoraim argue on this, but Shmuel says, once you make yourself not the owner of the Eved or the Amma, the Shivcha Knainis, you're no longer the owner, then there's no Kinyan Isser anymore. You don't have to give her a get shikr. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. This is Shmuel's unique position. Shenemar v'chol Eved ish miknas kesef. Eved, this is Shmuel's, he derives from the pasuk. V'chol Eved ish miknas kesef. Eved ish v'lo Eved isha. Right? A woman could also own a slave. Ela Eved sheish lo rishus l'rabo of kari Eved. She'ein lo rishus l'rabo of ein kari Eved. If he has a master over him, he's called an Eved. Once the master is maftir him, he gives up ownership, so he's no longer called an Eved. The shame of an Eved, the classification as Eved goes away. Amsi the Rabbi Abba bar Zutra Ishtabai. The maidservant Rabbi bar Zutra was taken captive. Parka Hahu Tarmuda Lashum is a certain Tarmudai. I don't believe he was Jewish. He ransomed her to be a wife to him. Shalchu Leila Didei, to be a free woman and a wife to him. Shalchu Leila Didei, they sent to him, Iyeyos Abda Shadalakita de Cherusa. If you want to do good, right? They said to Rabbi Zutra, the master, send her a get, right, that's freeing her. So the Gemara asked, hey Chidan, what's the case? Matzu Parkila. If this Talmudai is willing to ransom her, Lama Ligita de Cherusa. Why are you giving her a get at shefer? Be ransom her. Either lo matzi parkula. If they can't, he's not willing to take ransom. Kishada Ligita de Cherusa might help you. How does it help? Right? He's still going to enslave her. The Marzalo de Matzu Parkula. Really, they could have. He was willing to take money to the ransom. It came in the Mishali Ligita de Cherusa. Once he sent to get shikra, so it helped crowdfund. More people were willing to give money. Once they saw that she's partially free with the get shikra, they're willing to give money, to raise the money to ransom her. A different answer. Really, but the case is talking about he wasn't accepting a ransom. Once they gave her get shikra, which showed that she was formerly a shivcha knainis, she was a maidservant. She became demeaned in his eyes, a mafarikla, and he'll redeem her. He'll let her go free. Amar Mar, the Gemara says, Chaviv lahen behemten shal Yisrael yoser min shoseya. We know that non-Jews, the Gemara says that their dogs or their animals are more worth, or they treat them better than their actual wives, right? So how does the fact that you disgraced her, she looks more like a woman, like a maidservant, which is closer to an animal. How does that help? Why is he going to free her? That's in private, what they do in private with their animals. The Gemara discusses that they'll have sodomy with their animal. For Heskia, Zilu b'vam milsa. And when it's known that she was a shivcha knainis, that she was a maidservant, it's embarrassing for them, and he'll free her. There was a certain maidservant who was Isura. She was a maidservant, and a lot of people took advantage of her. They were raping her. They're doing terrible things. Shmuel says that if you free your Evet for no reason, we'll see, you're over be'esei, you violate Mitzvah's essay. Pasuk is la'olam behem davod. We'll see in a second. Hava kaifina lemarav kasel agida de cherusa. I would have basically forced the owner to free her, so they shouldn't violate. Right? They were taking advantage of her because she was a maidservant in the house. But I can't do that because you can't violate the essay. Kasel agida de cherusa. Ravina said, Ki ha moda Rav Yehuda mishum milsa de yisur. In this case, even Rav Yehuda named Shmuel would admit, since there's an isur being done to her, you're allowed to free her. Abaye mishum yisura lo. So the Gemara says Abaye, because of Isra, would not free her. Amar Rav Chanina bar Rav Gittin, Amar Rav Yitzchak ma'aseh b'isha achas. There was a certain woman, shechetzia shivcha b'chetzia baschar. She had two masters, right? They had a partnership over it. One master freed her, one master did not free her, right? So the Gemara says, top of Alam Chedam and Beis, the kafu as Rabbah, the rabbis forced the master b'asal b'schar and freed her. The Amar Rav Nachmar Yitzchak. What's the reason they freed her? Minag hefker nagubar. She couldn't marry a Jew. She couldn't marry an Eved Kanaini because she was half Baschor and half free. So therefore, the people took advantage of her. So you take advantage of her, you could free her. So where's the Hakiyash Hasam little Eved Chazia, the Ben Chor and Chazia? Her situation, there's no remedy for her situation. Unless you free her. The reason Abayi was unwilling to force him to free her is because there's a way of saving her from people taking advantage of her by giving her an Eved Kanani as a husband, and he'll protect her. So therefore, there's a way out. So therefore, it's better not to free her. Gufa Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Kol Meshachar Avdo over be'esei. If you free your Eved, you violate an essay. Shenemar la'olam behem ta'avodu. It says you have to keep them forever. Meisive, I have a question from Rice. Meisive Rebelezer, Shnechnas Beis Knesset Lamatzah Asara. Let's went to his shul. He didn't find 10 people. There were only 9 people over there. And Eved Kaini can't join to a minyan. Shecher Avdo, he freed his Eved to make a minyan. They had 10 people. They can daven a minyan. They can daven Shema Esrei B'tzibur. They can say Kaddish, Kedusha. The Gemara says a mitzvah shiny. There, it's a mitzvah. It's allowed. It's a mitzvah. Now, what mitzvah is there? It's not even a chiyuv to daven Shema Esrei, but there's a mitzvah to say Kaddish and Kedusha with 10 people. Some say it's Rabbanan. It could be D'oraisa, Kiddush Hashem. But the question is, right, if it's D'Rabbanan, which the Rosh claims D'Rabbanan, so then how could you violate Yosef D'oraisa for D'Rabbanan? When do we say D'Rabbanan is stronger than D'oraisa? So the Rosh says that it's a mitzvah D'Rabim, Kaddish and Kedusha is a mitzvah D'Rabim. Even though it's D'Rabbanan, it's stronger than a mitzvah essay. It's hard to understand a little bit because the Gemara says Abaye they were doing Isurim to her, right? Which they were Arayos over there, which is very severe, grave sins, and for that mitzvah, normally a violation of law, she was being abused over there. If a mitzvah, the Rabbanan, even the Rabbim is important, shouldn't that have propelled Abaye to free her also? The Ramban has a different explanation of mitzvah shiny, and I'll talk about that. I believe the Ramban is correct. I'll talk about the Ramban and why he's correct in Ben Sion. Tan Rabbanan, La'olam behem tavodo rishos, Divir Rabbi Shmuel. It's actually a machlokas about this pasuk. La'olam behem tavodo, you should have avodim knainim, you should work them forever. That's optional, according to Rabbi Shmuel. It's a good advice, maybe. Rakiva Omer, chova, you have to always maintain them as well. You're not allowed to free them. When Relezer freed his Eved, why are we asking a question? Maybe you hold it's optional. If you want to, you could free him. So the Gemara says, Los HaGadaitach, the sound you behead, you have a brisa explicitly, Relezer Omer Chova. He subscribes to the view of Rekiva, that's a Chova. Amar Rabba, Bahani Plus Mili Nachsi Balabatim Minachseyan. 3 things cause rich people to lose their wealth. The Mafki Abdayu Lecherusa. They're so wealthy, they do a nice kindness and they free their avodim, which is Asr. With the Siri Nichsayu, Beshabsa, and they go ahead and they have large estates, and they let people go measure their estates and take care and maintenance their estates on Shabbos. Either you're employing people to work on Shabbos in Farhesia, or you're doing davar to worry about the monetary value of your estate. It's a violation of davar, and Tzachar Shabbos. The third violation, they would have their meals, they would set up their meals, their fancy meals on Shabbos afternoon at a time when people will be learning. Large people attended these rich people's meals, they had a lot of guests, and they couldn't go learn on Shabbos. A lot of people, for Balavatim, who worked the whole week, Shabbos is a time to learn. He was taking that possibility away from them. There are 2 families in Yerushalayim. One family established their big meal on Shabbos. Stay in Nekro. 2 of those families were removed. They lost their wealth. The one on Shabbos we mentioned before is because they took away time for the base medrash. So the Erev Shabbos that we learn in Hilchos Shabbos is you're not supposed to have a fancy meal like a Sudas Erison, or even to have a Sudas Nisuin on Friday afternoon because you can't get ready for Shabbos. That's the main reason. Let's say you consecrate your Eved to the base of Migdash. Rav says he goes free. My time. Gufei lo Kaddish. You can't be Makdish the body of an Eved. He's not an animal. I can't remember what it's a korban. Dame lo Kamar. He didn't say that I'm Makdish him for his value. Delaheve am Kadosh Kamar. When he says Makdish him, he meant to say that he should be part of the holy nation. He should be free like a Jew. Rav Yosef Amar Rav. Yosef is the name of Rav. Hamafkir Avdol Yosef Lecheres. Rav's didn't say a Makdish Avdol. He says if you're Mafkir him, you make him ownerless, then he goes out of freedom. For freedom. Mine are Makdish. The one who says Rav who says Makdish, Kol Shekain Mafkir, certainly Mafkir, he goes free. Mine are Mafkir, or Makdish low. If you're Makdish him, he does not go free. Dilma Demeka Omar. Maybe he's Makdish him, he's just using him as a means to say, how much is the Eved Knaini worth? Whatever value he's worth, I'm going to give that value to the Beis HaMikdash. In these cases where he's Makdish his Eved or Mafkir him, does he need to get shukr or not? We learn Shmuel says you don't need a key. You don't need it. Tashma Amar Rav Barav and Amar Rav Rav holds he could argue on Shmuel. He needs to get shukr. Sorry, Yatzal is to get shukr. You need to get shukr. Amar Rabba umosvina shmaisen. Rabba says we have a question from. Right, we just said that you're Makdish your Eved. Rabba in the name of Rav, you're Makdish your Eved. It goes to Cheres. We have a brisa which seems to contradict this. Hamakdish dechasav, you're makdish all your entire property, the base of Mikdash. Vayubahan avodim, you had slaves, avodim k'nayim. And the gizbarin rashayin lotzio, the gizbarin can't go ahead and free them. Lotzio l'cheirus. Aval mochin l'sal l'acheirim, acheirim lotzio l'sal l'acheirim. They can sell it to other people, in which case they get the value, which is consecrated based on Mikdash. And the other people, they're basically chulin in the hands of other people. They could free them. Rabbi Omer, Rabbi says, Omer ani afu nosein d'mei atzmo. Not only that, the Eved could pay for himself, right? He'll pay the money of his value to the base on Mikdash. He can go free. It's like he's selling himself. He's selling the Eved to himself. Masis and Karam. So you see over here that when you're Makdish an Eved, you're Makdish him for his value, not that you're freeing him. He doesn't go free. Someone has to buy him. Whereas Masis's Karam is allowed to Rav. You're asking for Rav from a Brisa or a Mishnah. Rav Tanahu Polik. Rav happened to be a Tana. He can argue on a Brisa or a Mishnah. Tashma. Another Brisa contradicting Rav. Achkol Cherem. Ma'adam. Right? This pasuk is talking about sanctifying things to the Beis HaMikdash. Talks about different animals. And he says consecrating a person. Ma'adam. Elo avodav shilchosav agnanim. It says that people, when you consecrate them to the Beis HaMikdash, that's talking about your avodim knainim and your shvachos, knainios. So you see what? You could consecrate them based on Mikdash. No, if you explicitly said you're Makdish him for his value, that's what this Mishnah is talking about. Ledami, right? What Rabban, instead of the name of Rav, he's talking about, you just say, I'm makdish the Evet. If I say Ladami, it's for his value. I always value based on the English. So I'm makdish him, I meant to say, I'm kadosh, that he's freed. So the Gemara says, Ihachi, idach nami. The first price also. Why don't we say, to answer that question? You also said Ladami. That would answer that question nicely. Why do we say Rav Tanu Upali? Whereas Ihachi, Enak Gizbarim Rishon Lo on the Cheros. The first brisa, what does it mean the Gizbarim can't free him? The Gizbarim Maya B'tayu. Why are we talking about the Gizbarim? The Gizbarim, right? If you said Ladami, I'm makdish him for his value, that just means I owe his value. Let's say he's worth $100. I give $100, I owe $100 based on Mikdash. The Gizbarim of the Beis Hamikdash can't go ahead and sell him. They don't own him. They could sell him to other people, and the other people could sell him l'cheros. Right? The Gizbarim didn't own him, and when you buy him from the Gizbarim, you don't own them, so you can't free them. Rebbe adds that he can even buy himself back. You can't. You don't own ownership. If you say Ladami, all it means is that whatever the value of the Evet Kanani is, I'm giving that value to the Beis Hamikdash. I'm not selling the Evet Kanani to the Gizbar to the Beis Hamikdash. So how could people start selling him? So obviously it's talking about we didn't say Ladami, and you have to give the answer Rav Tano Polig. We'll stop over here. Stay tuned for Ilan Ben Sia. I want to talk about this Isser in the Torah, Olam Tavodu. We paskin like Rabbi Akiva, like Rabbi Lazar, that basically you're not, if you have an Evet Kanani, you can't free them. You're not allowed to free them. Except mitzvah shani, you make a minion, you could, but apparently to stop other people from violating the shifcha kanayas, you're not allowed to. Hard to understand. We'll explain that Ian with Ben Sion coming up next.